This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. Well, while it's important to finish strong if you can, you dang better end strong. Hey there, folks! I need to do the companion because I recently did the ranking for the Doctor Who season premieres. We got to do finales, which I have actually done before. I'd forgotten that I did it before. It was a long time ago. The show looked like this. So, yeah, this is well worth a revisit. I got to tell you, before I get started, though, this is way harder than the premieres. I have a lot less confidence in this ranking, and I am pretty positive that if you asked me on another day, there would be more than a few things shifted around. Not drastically, but there's more than a few spots where I'm like, I could flip those two, and there's multiple of those. So, reminder that while in the past with rankings, I have treated two-parters as a single story, for this list, as with the premieres, I will be treating these as single episodes. So when I talk about finales, I'm only talking about the literal last episode of a given series or season, whatever you choose to call them. We've got them being called both now. That's not confusing. But this is something that helps some stories because some had wonkiness that went on in the first part that I didn't like, but finished strong. And it's going to hurt others because there are some where the setup was stronger than the finish, and that would have buoyed it, but now it's lower as a result of that. But anyways, let's try and keep the preamble short. I go on a little too long before doing the rankings. Let's do this. Number 14. The Battle of Ranskoor Kolos. This thing really does fail at just about every level. It fails as a finale. It fails as a story. It fails for character arcs. It fails for raw narrative. It just doesn't work at all. Visually, it's okay. It's not amazing, but this thing is a mess. I have brought this thing up recently more than a few times, so I'll try to keep my comments on it a little bit on the short side, but this is a first draft. Chris Chibnall has admitted as much because he had to set his own work aside in order to help polish up everybody else's script because most of the writing staff for his first series weren't experienced in writing for science fiction or television or Doctor Who or all three. So he had to help massage other people's scripts, had less time for his own. This is literally a first draft, and boy, can you tell. There are multiple ideas that just have nothing to do with anything. The Ux are a weird, odd alien that's completely underdeveloped. The fact that this is taking place on a planet that supposedly messes with your head literally never comes up in the entire run of the story, so that's completely pointless. It tries to make a recurrent powerful villain out of Sim Shaw, and it just doesn't. He wasn't that interesting the first time, and now he's just thrown in here out of nowhere. They try and have this payoff with Graham, like, oh, he wants revenge, except getting over his grief was a big part of just the previous episode to this. It doesn't work as a finale because this was a series that didn't really have much of an overarching story anyway, which in and of itself doesn't need to be a problem, but this means this isn't paying off any season-long stuff, and it also just fails on its own merits as a standalone story. It's just a mess. Number 13, The Timeless Children. Less of a sprawling disaster than the Battle of Ranskoor Kolos. Still pretty bad, though. And again, this is another one I've talked about multiple times, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. But short version, the payoffs to the mystery box of the Timeless Child were deeply unsatisfying. Some of the general ideas could have been something, but they're executed very, very poorly. It doesn't even properly deliver on what was set up in the very previous episode, appearing to forget its own structure as it tries to claim that the Master was injecting those visions of the guy in Ireland, Brendan or whatever it was, into the Doctor's mind when there was literally nothing indicating that the Doctor was seeing that and it was anything other than a narrative device the previous episode. That is kind of a previous episode issue, but it actually is an issue here because this is the episode that just gets wrong what had even been done or what was happening. There's the changes to the lore, which honestly is probably what I care about the least. I don't care that much about lore. I do care about the importance of the Doctor. I don't like the Doctor when they are made super important. And by nature of making the Doctor the timeless child, yeah, that elevates the Doctor's innate importance in a way that I don't like and I feel undermines the character. But most egregiously, it destroys Gallifrey. Completely. Not just because we come to a destroyed Gallifrey in the previous episode, but because it gets double destroyed by setting off the death particle or whatever the hell it is. So if there were any surviving Time Lords still on the planet, they're all gone, including the children the Doctor went out of their way to save at the 50th anniversary special. Screw this episode. It is better put together than Battle of Ranskoor Kolos, but goddamn. Number 12, The Wedding of River Song. Yeah, let's lay off Chibnall for at least a little bit. Let's step up Moffat, put him in the punching bag for a little bit. This is just a mess. This honestly, a little bit like Battle of Ranskoor Kolos is just doing too much. There's too many ideas thrown into this, many of which just are not being put to proper use. The whole idea of everything in time happening at once, that's a really cool idea that beyond the initial setup, basically nothing happens with it. The supposed payoff and explanation that we get for the silence and the woman with the eye patch, whose name I can't even remember anymore, it's okay, but this thing feels just like a tangled, knotted mess of trying to finish off, tie off, correct, or undo a bit of a messy series worth of stuff, and it doesn't pull it off. And more to the point, it doesn't pull it off while telling a very satisfactory story. The ideal Doctor Who season or series finale is one that will, yes, tie up whatever is waiting to be dealt with that was brought up earlier in the series, but also tell a story that is good and entertaining and fun and enjoyable in and of itself. This barely manages the former and completely fails at the latter. So, yeah, it's down here. Number 11, The Vanquishers. Yeah, we were only taking a brief pause to lay off Chibnall. Get back up here, Chris. So, yeah, the finale of Flux. Flux as a supposed more serialized take on Doctor Who, which it barely is, if we're being honest. It's just the standard overarching season story condensed down to fewer episodes than can support the dang thing. But as the supposed payoff to a serialized season, it just isn't. It fails to give a satisfactory conclusion to our primary villains who just get blinked out of time by this embodiment of time. And we really don't know what's going on with that. That really just seems to only exist to set up the next stuff and to hint at who's going to cause the regeneration, and really no meaningful payoff there. All the stuff with the timeless child, all this hint of, oh, your memories, here they are, and nope, we'll just drop that down into the TARDIS. And it's not even that, like, I desperately need the answers. It's not that I care that much, but, like, if you're not going to give the answers, why did you even do any of this? This feels like a letdown not only to the conclusion of this season, but to the conclusion of anything involved in the Timeless Children, as it basically just sweeps the entire thing away. I get that it wasn't a good idea, but why'd you do it in the first place if you were never going to pay it off properly? Not to mention the fact that this story effectively wipes out about a third of the universe and never acknowledges it. It would fall to Russell T Davies to acknowledge that frickin' fact. Anyways, moving on. Number 10, Hellbent. This frickin' thing. Look, there are some things that I accept about this. I have come to accept that by and large, People who adore Clara as a character enjoy this episode a lot more than I do. I am not nearly as down on Clara as I used to be, but her strongest stuff is the middle of her run. Her first series isn't great. The way they wrap out her story post Face the Raven isn't great. But I do appreciate her more as a character. I just don't care about her enough for this story to work for me. And it does seem to be the common thread that by and large, people who really like this also tend to really like Clara. And fair enough. She's fine. I don't like her enough to buoy up this story enough. There are good things here. There's some of the interactions between the Doctor and Clara, especially the goodbye before his memory gets wiped. That's good stuff. There's some other decent moments. His facing down Rassilon, while it would have been nice for him to face down Timothy Dalton, it's still just a good moment. His refusal to talk to literally anybody until he's facing the guy he wants, that is also some good stuff. But the extremes to which they take the Doctor, I still have a hard time swallowing. And I think that's why this really depends on you really liking Clara. Basically, you have to like Clara enough that you'd be willing to go to the same extremes that the Doctor does. And I don't. So it doesn't fully work for me. And that's the stuff that I understand. There's some other stuff in here that I'm like, why would you even do that? What is even the point of that? So I'm in a situation where there's a chunk of this, I will just put my hands up and go, I don't get it. I don't get what you're doing or why you do it that way. I don't get what the whole thing with the hybrid is, what point you were trying to make with how vague, and the fact that people are still trying to impose numerous meetings and it's still debated to this day. Whatever you were trying to do, Moffat, you didn't. Just this whole thing with the barn and these Gallifreyans who look like they're in Little House on the Prairie. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm just like, why? Why would you do that at all? So there's stuff that I admit I don't get, and then there's other stuff that I think I get, but I don't know why you'd ever do it. There is still some good stuff here, though, which is why, despite my well-documented dislike of this episode, it wasn't at the bottom. Number 9, The Empire of Death. Hey, Russell. You got to stay off the bottom pretty well, but yeah, it's your turn. I know that there are some people who really tore the hell into this and consider it to be the worst finale ever. Oddly enough, most of the people who I've seen taking that position are the people who were liking the new season up until that point. I think they just expected way more than they were ever going to get. Because honestly, while this is not a good finale, it's also pretty standard to what RTD does. It's worse executed than his normal stuff, but like, this is pretty standard for him. This is pretty normal to have a pretty contrived solution to the thing, to have it feel like it's a little bit too easy. Like the sort of stuff that he's doing in this, that's what he does. And there are good scenes in this. I really like the scene between the Doctor and that woman on the planet that is dying, who has forgotten that her own child has died. That scene is haunting, and I love it. The scene of Ruby reuniting with her mother, I think, was really well done, and that could have been a massive ball drop. Like, if they'd bombed at that, this would be towards the actual bottom if they'd bombed that scene, but they didn't. They sold it and they made it work. Is the resolution for Sutek, is it a mess? Like, does the damage he do, is it too much, too fast, so you know it's going to be reversed and there's no lasting consequences to this whatsoever, and then it's undone in a pretty contrived way that magically resets everything? Yeah. Again, that's kind of what RTD does more often than not. So, while I get not liking it, I don't really like it that much. I don't understand being mad at it. There's some good stuff here. It's not enough, but there is. Number 8, The Big Bang. Yeah, I know some people really love this one. I've never liked this one. And this is one where breaking it up into two-parters definitely hurt it. Because Pandorica Opens is great. The setup for this finale is mwah. But we're not taking that into account. And you know how I said the ideal finale is going to tie up your loose ends and pay off your story points and hopefully have a good emotional satisfaction, but also be a good story in and of itself? Yeah, this fails at the last part. My issue with this is not a story. This is an exercise in tying up loose ends. This feels like Moffat showing off, like, ooh, all those loose threads. You thought I couldn't tie them all up? Look at this. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of impressive you tied that all together. You didn't tell a very interesting story while you did it, though. There is, again, still some good in here. I would say that towards the end with Amy wishing back the TARDIS, that is really satisfying, and that feels good. And having River here is also good just as a general thing, because River's a lot of fun, and there's some good iconic stuff with that. There's the Fez. Yeah, Fezes are cool. There are some good moments and beats, but the story overall doesn't feel like a story. It feels like Moffat flexing as far as his ability to keep track of all his disparate plot threads and pull them all together. I'm like, okay, yeah, you did do that. Would have been nice if we gotten a good story while you were at it. Number 7, The Last of the Time Lords. Yeah, this used to be the high mark of RTD overbanking on sort of the sappiness and refusing to have lasting consequences. Because the whole thing, like, first of all, I appreciate the elevation of Martha. That Martha is effectively key to saving the entire world. Awesome. I love Martha. But that it ultimately comes down to everybody prays to the Doctor so that he can be revived and be space Jesus for a minute and forgive his enemy. Come on. Is it painful? No. It's a little cringeworthy. It's a little too silly. It's a little too clean, especially given that it completely rolls back the year of the Master having been in charge of the Earth. So all that stuff that happened in previous episode, yep, no consequences. Forget consequences. We're not doing it. And people try and tell me, oh, but the people who are on the airship were traumatized. I'm like, yeah, okay, but you blew the stakes so out of proportion. You went so big with the stakes that if that's all that is left, no, come on. You shouldn't have gone that big if you weren't prepared to deliver on something that big. But this is, I would say, the John Sim as Master during Series 3, where he's probably working the best. I like John Sim better later on when he shows up down the line. But he's working about as well as he did in his initial appearance. We get some Jack Harkness, which is appreciated, issues with the actor aside. And I do appreciate the idea of the Master not regenerating out of sheer spite. That's on brand, and I like it. So there's some good stuff here. It just, this thing overdoes it. It overdoes it by a bit. Number 6, The Name of the Doctor. Now, the thing is, when this first aired, I liked this a lot. And I still like it. I think a lot more of my enjoyment of this came down to the cliffhanger at the end than I realized. Because over time, trying to think of like the really good parts of this, the real good moments, the real impressive stuff, I haven't got that much. I haven't got too many complaints either. But I think the fact that when I try and think of like, what's really good about this? Well, there's the Paternoster gang. I mean, that's nice. They don't do a ton, but they are present. They're nice to have. The stuff with River is kind of nice, especially the idea that like she's just kind of fading because the Doctor, it hurts him to know that she's not really there and she's more or less gone, but also that affirmation towards the end that like, yeah, he does see her. It's hurt too much to acknowledge her. So that works for me. I actually really like the Great Intelligence, and a bit like what I mentioned with the Master not regenerating out of pure spite, the idea that the Great Intelligent hates the Doctor so much, he will tear his entire timeline apart, his own personal timeline, to shreds, just so he can hurt the Doctor, just so he can take this guy out. That's a level of commitment to revenge and anger that I just admire. And also, Richard E. Grant, he's real good for this. But other than like little bits like that, like Trenzalore and the TARDIS is really like, okay, that's kind of interesting. The Whisper Men are kind of throwaway. Like, it's a decent visual. There isn't much to them. And honestly, thinking back on it, I have a hard time remembering, wait, what filled up the runtime? Because the stuff I remember can't have been the whole thing. So there's whole aspects of this just kind of fade. The stuff that I remember is good. I just feel like I've forgotten more than I remember, which isn't a great sign. Number 5, Journey's End. Oh, this one hurts so good. We're also at a point where it's now largely a question of what I think succeeded more rather than having a failing that dragged it down. Because this does have a rushed and somewhat convenient conclusion on multiple fronts. The Dr. Donna, and like she's just able to solve everything on her own, and then Rose gets to go off with her own personal doctor who's gonna age with her. Like, that's real convenient, but it feels way more earned than stuff like, say, Empire of Death, which structurally and in terms of how things wrap up, it's not that much different than, but it feels way more earned. For how long Rose has been without the Doctor, that feels more earned. Yeah, the Dr. Donna solved everything pretty quickly in a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but there's consequences to that. There's painful consequences to that. The Doctor erasing her memory and her begging him not to do it breaks my heart every single time she is pleading with him to not make her the person she was. And he does it anyway. And it hurts so good. Davros is back. We get a full conclusion on the Cult of Skaro with Dalek Khan. We get so many guest stars showing up in this. That's like, issues with some of the actors aside, that's just a fun thing to bring them all together. And the Daleks, you've got to have the Daleks for a finale this big. Yeah, it's good. It has some of RTD's crutches and contrivances, but it hits right. Number 4, Death in Heaven. All right, I feel like this might be one of my more contentious placements. I've got a fair few things I really like about this. Firstly, I'll just say it, I like Danny Pink. I think Danny Pink is a good character. I think what he did for Clara as a character is also good, but I also think he's a good character in and of himself. I like Danny, I like his presence, and I like his payoff. It feels proper, it feels earned, it feels like a good conclusion to the running themes around soldiers following orders, who dies, who says that they go out and die for a cause, who decides that? Is the Doctor a soldier? Is the Doctor a commander? These questions get resolved really nicely around Danny. And that feels really nice, really appropriate. Missy, having now revealed who she is, we get to see her just go full Missy. And I adore Missy. Michelle Gomez is so good in this part. She loves what she does. That is part of what is so great about her. She is having a ball at every step of this. And I love that her ultimate conclusion is to literally offer the Doctor an army in the hope that it'll give her her friend back. And I love the Doctor's conclusion.
I am an idiot.
With a box and a screwdriver, passing through, helping out, and learning. Mwah! That is my platonic ideal of who the Doctor is. And hearing my favorite Doctor, Peter Capaldi, be the ones to say it, it makes me so happy. I like this one a lot. I think it pays off emotionally. I think it wraps up the logistics of the story well enough, but it's also fun. I really like this. And I think a fair few of you have slept on it. Number 3, The Parting of the Ways. I was surprised at how high this landed. Here's why. This is the episode that by far benefited the most from being decoupled from its previous episode. Because there's a lot I don't like about Bad Wolf. Basically, what it breaks down to is I really don't like the show parodies. I don't like them at all. I don't think they're funny. I don't think they're entertaining. I think they drag the story down. I don't like them. And they are a very significant chunk of Bad Wolf. But if I'm looking at this in isolation, nope. This is its own thing. And taking it as its own thing, yeah, this is real good. Eccleston is in top form here. His refusal to set off the Delta Wave because when asked, coward or killer?
Coward. Any day.
It's wonderful. The wrap up with Rose and the whole Bad Wolf thing is, as is RTD's want, a little contrived, a little convenient, but has an emotional resonance, partially buoyed by just the tears streaming down Billie Piper's face. When she says it hurts, you believe her. And you believe what the doctor had to do to save her. I don't super love the kiss as a logistical thing. I don't like the doctor kissing. I just don't. So I don't love that. But other than that, like, this is really good. This is really strong. Jack is in really good form. I've already mentioned issues with the actor, not dealing with it today. But all these other moments of these other people, these other characters that we've met, and seeing the Daleks take them out, like the threat of the Daleks is really well delivered in here. The Emperor Dalek, that voice, this is a really, really strong finish. I would have liked Eccleston to get more time. I'm really glad he's over at Big Finish now. But this is a good send-off. This is a good, strong finish. And once I decouple it from Bad Wolf, I'm able to appreciate it all the more. Number 2, Doomsday. That wall, man. A wall apart and worlds away. It's real good emotional damage. Especially because you don't necessarily know it's coming. Like the pain in your gut when you feel your stomach drop when Rose loses her grip and starts to fall. And while you're relieved that she gets saved, knowing that they're apart, yeah, that's rough. And I'm someone who doesn't like the shipping aspect of those two's relationship at all, but I can still set that aside and buy how much this hurts. How much this hurts each of them. And prior to that, we've just got a rollicking good time. This is one that also kind of benefits from the previous episode being dropped. Not that Army of Ghosts is bad, it's just all set up and almost nothing else. So this is just basically all the payoffs, all the good stuff. The Daleks and Cybermen just bash the toys together. Sometimes that's fun. Sometimes that's just what you want. It's not what I want every time. It's not what I want all finales to be. But you know what? Every now and then, yeah, take the toys, bash them together, have fun. Especially if you're going to give us an emotional payoff that just hits us in the gut afterwards. That's a nice pairing, actually. Waiter, can I have this pairing more often? These go together really well. And number 1, the Doctor falls. To the surprise of literally nobody who knows me. This is my favorite Doctor. This is my favorite season of the show since the revival. This is, depending on the day you ask me, sometimes I will call this my favorite episode of the show. Bill, what Pearl Mackie is able to bring to this character as she goes through, or has gone through something absolutely horrific, is great. Nardole is fun, and that fun never feels like it's interrupting. He doesn't feel like tacked on comic relief. He feels organic to the situation, and he'll have his little jokes, and they'll give you a moment of levity. Then there's Missy and the Master. This is the best depiction of the John Sim Master, for the record. But seeing him bring out the worst in Missy again, seeing Missy push back on that, seeing him bitterly refuse to accept that he could ever be better again and kill her for it. And then there's the Doctor himself. I mentioned before that Death in Heaven kind of had the description of my platonic ideal of the Doctor, and that's true. But this one speaks aloud the mantra of my platonic ideal of the Doctor.
I do what I do because it's right. Because it's decent. And above all, it's kind.
This moment, that speech, that yelling, that desperate pleading, just be kind. That's everything. That is everything I want from Doctor Who, from the Doctor as a character. All of it contained in those moments, delivered expertly by Capaldi. This is a phenomenal finale, and honestly could have even been the end of the show, and it still would have been a real strong finish. I'm glad it wasn't, to be clear, but it is such a strong end that perfectly encapsulates everything I love about this character. I can't say the episode encapsulates everything I love about the show, because what I love about the show is wide-reaching. If you tried to cram everything I love about the show into one episode, that episode would be a mess. But this does put to screen everything I love about the character of the Doctor. And I can't ask for anything more than that. So that's my ranking. What did you think? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe, maybe. They all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful. You are valid. You are loved. And I want you to be well. Be safe, and be kind. You are the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to give thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabi Lex the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pau Baraba Jago, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I don't know, it feels right that it's October the first time you're seeing all three of these at the same time.